JP Switch Mania.
Hello, Power Players, and welcome to JP Switchmania's second ever video review, where today we're looking at a genre mashup. I guess that's the hot new trend. Today's game blends dungeon crawling RPGs with roguelike dungeon generation with Pong. Yeah, Pong. It's called Pong Quest, and I have to admit, I was a little suspicious of the idea when JP first sent me the code, but the concept has some surprising legs. Ultimately, though, it's a little too much Pong and not quite enough Quest. The basics of the game are fairly simple. Players assume the role of a brave young Pong paddle recruited by the Pong Paddle King to explore the various sealed dungeons that litter his castle. The king needs you to figure out why his popularity in his kingdom is waning. And maybe, just maybe, it's because he sealed off large portions of his kingdom's population in a series of dungeons and or the moon? Just a thought. Anyway, there's one especially ominous door that needs 4 magic orbs to open, which have, conveniently, been locked away in the castle's other 4 dungeons. Once you get into the dungeons, things are laid out like the oldest school Legend of Zelda possible. Almost every room in the dungeon is the same size as the screen, with a few larger rooms that are either double or quadruple the dimensions of the normal room. Littered about the chambers are treasure chests, challenges, and random-ish enemies. Chests have money and Pong balls, challenges are puzzles that reward you with money and Pong balls, and enemies can be defeated to receive money and Pong balls. Oh, and most importantly, cosmetic items. When an enemy spots you, and by the way, things here go by Pokemon rules. If you make eye contact, you gotta fight. That's when combat begins. Combat is, Pong. You've got your paddle, and your enemy is another paddle, and you whack a ball between you. Every volley is a basic attack, and you or your foe lose 1 hit point every time you volley back and forth. If you can sneak the ball past your opponent, or one sneaks past you, that lands a critical hit, which does a bunch more damage. You also need to land a critical to KO an enemy. You can't do it just by volleying, no matter how many HP they have left. The twist in Pong Quest is that you can also collect and use special balls during combat, which is roughly the equivalent of using magic or skills in other RPGs. You can increase your inventory of these balls by snagging them from chests as quest rewards or by defeating bad guys like I previously mentioned. There are a surprising number of special abilities available for your Pong balls, ranging from healing your health to dealing extra damage to creating hazards on the field that affect the way the ball travels. The only drawback is that your opponent can also use these abilities against you, and let me tell you, some of these things are cheap as hell. Especially since the AI is suspiciously great at tracking balls, even if they've had a path randomizing effect laid on them. I suppose the challenge has to come from somewhere, however, and I still made progress in the game at a decent rate, so I guess I'll let it go. Probably my favorite part of the game is all the cosmetic items you can unlock. There are 4 types of cosmetic items: skin, headwear, clothing, and accessories. Want to make a tiger paddle in a shark costume with a karate headband and fairy wings? You can. I had way too much fun mixing and matching fashions. I also learned the hard way not to use long hats. Hats don't count as part of your paddle, so the ball will travel right through it. It's not a way to cheat yourself to a longer paddle. I mean, I get why they did it. You've got to keep the game balanced. I just thought I was being clever when I tried it, but it turns out the devs saw me coming from a mile away. It was very deflating. So the combat concepts and cosmetics are all well and good, but the game just wears thin quickly after the initial impressions. Some rooms have puzzles, but they're all pretty simple. You've got a couple memory mini game types, one where you flip cards and one where you have to remember a sequence of lights like Simon. There's one where you have to build a path through which to fire a bullet, and one where you need to figure out how to light up a panel. But ultimately, though, there just isn't enough variety to keep the gameplay interesting, and its storyline lacks the punch to pick up the slack. Now, I don't want to rag too hard on Pong Quest's story. It is fairly amusing, and the few between dungeon cutscenes you get are sharply written and feature at least a couple of great lines each. It's just too thin. There are no great characters to relate to or any grand plots to really sink your teeth into. I recently finished playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake, because who hasn't, and its gameplay sometimes wore thin after a while too. The combat was fun, don't get me wrong, but the same strategy sort of worked for every fight, with a few notable exceptions. What kept the sameness from getting boring, however, was that it had a fantastic story to keep players invested. I realize Pong Quest as a concept just isn't going to be able to build the same dramatic experience as a more, air quotes, serious RPG, but that doesn't mean the lack of a deeper story doesn't hurt player investment in the game. You can squeeze a little additional value out of the game with its multiplayer functions. You can go online and play against players from around the world using your avatar, and you can also play locally, either plain old classic Pong or as a battle setup where you can use a random selection of special balls. It's neat to have, but it doesn't really do enough to redeem the core issues of the single-player experience. And I do think probably the game's longevity issues can be radically alleviated by taking a more measured approach to progressing through the game. For review, though, I kind of have to binge games to get them out in a timely-ish fashion, which makes Pong Quest issues seem worse than they probably really are. If a regular player gets bored after an hour, they can walk away and come back later. If players limit themselves to one level of a dungeon at a time, they probably won't even experience the issues I had with the game's longevity. So taking that into account, I'm giving Pong Quest an 8 out of 10 for its excellent execution of an offbeat idea. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe so our egos here at JP Switch Mania can continue to rampage out of control. This is John from JP Switch Mania reminding you not to count your chickens before they cross the road.
JP Switch Mania.